What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Big Riff Energy. I am here with one of our most requested guests, the mighty Blake from Power Trip and Fugitive. Welcome, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very flattered that anybody wants to hear anything from me. So, I love getting to talk about music and stuff, and especially with you. So happy to be
Right on, man.
for having me.
Awesome. So let's start at the beginning. I like asking real deal riffers this question. I just started doing it kind of more recently, and it's like a fun way to start. Do you do you remember the first riff that you heard that made you realize that that's what you wanted to do?
The first riff I heard, yeah, that's a good question. One that really sticks with me. It's not like the super most interesting and unique response, but it was probably Jimi Hendrix because when I first started playing guitar, that was kind of the guy that I was really into. My dad would play me Jimi Hendrix. It's like, don't you want to play guitar? And I think just listening to him and stuff like Voodoo Child and um, the burning of the midnight lamp, all that stuff. It's just sort of, obviously Foxy Lady, all that. I think just the videos of him burning the guitar and everything, and the Star Spangled Banner, and just his guitar sound, his look, and everything. I was He was one of my first guitar heroes. Still is, but that was probably the guy that got me, wanting to take guitar lessons and learn how to play guitar.
Me too, man.
His earliest memory, I'd say it was him. There were other guys too, but that was a big one.
We're about the same age, and I know like in the '90s and early 2000s, whether it was like movies or commercials or whatever, there was a lot of like 60s and 70s classic rock and hard rock. And I remember, it's funny you bring up Jimi Hendrix because I remember specifically there was like a commercial for I guess they would call it like the iMac back in the day, the big ones that were like colored and like see-through. And there was a commercial for like a purple one, and they were playing Purple Haze. And I feel like that, yeah, Hendrix was like a hugely inspiring, probably for any guitar player, I would imagine. It was just so like weird and different, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking about this with my girlfriend yesterday because I was like, we were listening to like heard a Lenny Kravitz song, and it's funny because when I was younger, Lenny Kravitz was pretty popular too, and he was sort of like the modern day version of Jimi Hendrix, at least to me as a young kid, so like "Are You Gonna Go My Way" was all over the radio, and I mean that's like a very '60s sounding Hendrixy type song, and it was just interesting to think about because it's so throwback sounding in a lot of ways, and it was all over the radio all the way through like the 2000s, so it was kind of like, yeah, it's interesting how that music, there was still a place for that style in the 90s and even the 2000s with sort of all the
Yeah,
bands. So that was, I guess,
totally.
kind of my when I was younger, was the mid late 90s and the early 2000s when I was really starting to consume music, my teens and even before that. So yeah, that was it. It's funny how that was still sort of there. There was lingering a little bit of that even then. So that probably.
Yeah, guitar music was just everywhere, everywhere. Like I even think about like hearing Leonard Skinner at the beginning of Happy Gilmore, or like Forrest Gump, like the entire soundtrack is all just like classic badass guitar music. But you're right. Then there was also even a band like Queens of the Stone Age. Like there were current modern popular bands that were kind of channeling that like 70s thing as well.
Oh yeah,
Plus,
totally.
Guitar World magazine and all that sort of stuff. Guitar was very prevalent during that time for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, there were still like niche throwback style bands. I mean, in the early 2000s, you had a lot of that stuff like Wolf Mother and The Darkness, and then you had all these garage rock bands kind of doing stuff like the Hives and all that. So it was still very, guitar and band oriented even back then.
Dude, it's funny you bring up The Darkness and Wolfmother because their first records are, I still love those records. I fucking love them, man. That first Wolfmother is great.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like, you know, it definitely they're really good at imitating some of those sounds from those, stuff like Queen, and it's pretty cool that they were able to get away with that, even in the 2000s. I think some people
Totally.
thought it was kind of corny to, revisit all that, but I think we appreciated it. It'd be cool
Yeah,
if they were
for sure.
at on that level now.
So, what was kind of your gateway getting into the heavier stuff? What was that like?
It's weird. I didn't really get any of it growing up. My dad's he's like almost 70, so I think he sort of missed the boat on heavy metal and all that. I think Black Sabbath was kind of like too out there for him and his friends. Like they were already into new wave, and they were into jazz and all that by then. That's kind of what he tells me. So not that he doesn't think it's great, but he just so I didn't really hear it a lot growing up. It was kind of like all the 60s stuff, the 70s stuff, the Who and Neil Young and all that. But it really wasn't until, I mean, obviously being a teenager in the early 2000s, I mean, you had Headbangers Ball and all that. So you'd watch that. And, obviously you had like in the early 2000s, you had new metal and metalcore, which I wasn't a real big new metal fan, but you're just a kid going to the mall and, listening to stuff on TV. So like there was a second, I think I liked metalcore for a moment when it was kind of first coming out because it was just different. And then it wasn't too long as, I discovered hardcore. And then that kind of sent me going backwards, and finding how metal and hardcore kind of like crossed over in the 80s. So I think it was definitely hardcore, being into all that, and then trying to figure out where all the riffs came from, and then that's where the metal thing kind of came in, I would say. And yeah, from there, that's I guess that's how I got more into the heavy stuff, is just through hardcore. Like I said, there was a little bit of it, but I didn't really know what I liked until I started going backwards and learning about like my favorite hardcore bands and where they got influence and all that.
Right. It makes so much sense. You really kind of exclusively growing up on like just classic music and classic songwriting and stuff like that. Cause I know something we have in common. We seem to get on the subject like literally every time we see each other is like the difference between just stringing, like writing riffs is one art form, writing songs is like a totally different art form. And it's one thing to write cool riffs and string them together, just kind of one after the other. But writing songs is like such a different art form. And I feel like those old school bands were just so good at that. And even the best metal bands and the best hardcore bands, like the reason people like a band like Obituary so much is because they have songs, and that's because they came up listening to Sabbath and Blackfoot and Skynyrd and the older stuff. And I feel like you can learn how to write really cool riffs from metal bands, but the way to like really learn how to write a great song is like studying the old classics. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, whenever I talk about this with people, I'm always trying to be aware that, like there's lots of different kinds of metal and music in general, and not everything has to fit into a box. Like, there's plenty of styles of metal that like to throw those rules out the door, and you know put a lot of riffs together, and it's more about technicality. It's more about, it's like a prog thing almost, like there's a place for that. But personally, what I'm into is kind of like what you were saying. I'm just more of a songy guy in the sense of like keeping it kind of simple, and I think my brain just doesn't have the capacity to focus on bunch of different parts. I just kind of like, I need like a basic, road with the song, and a basic idea. And I just really get off on repetition, and like having a few distinct parts to focus on in a song and remember. and I like the way that the order, like the arrangement, tailors to the riffs and kind of milks them the right way. Like I'm just into that. I think obviously a lot of people are. It's a classic, tried and true formula. But when I talk about it, I never want to come off like, oh, there's only one way to write a song. Like I know that there's a million ways to do it, but I think me and you are on the same page. We like it the way that they did it back then, and those are the most memorable songs to us, I think. And I mean, history would probably agree with us, but
Totally. And you're right. I like a lot of really like out there experimental weirdo shit too, but there's something, yeah, just maybe more personally satisfying about writing like a good, catchy, like song in almost like a, pop structure, writing a metal song or a heavy song sort of with like the classic just radio song structure. It's kind of like a fun yeah, just like a fun paradigm to operate in.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say like it's funny. It's kind of like when there's bands that have a bunch of songs that aren't like that, and then their one song that's like that is their most popular song. And everybody's like, play that song. That's usually an indicator that hey, that works. That's like a that works sometimes. But I also appreciate like you don't have to do that every time. It kind of makes it more interesting. Maybe if you don't, but there's so many different ways to achieve that without just doing the same. There's not like one set way to write a catchy song or a good, you know what I mean? But like,
Right.
so there are lots of ways to do it, but I appreciate the artistry of working around that too. But I think yeah, the core should have like a good movie, it should have a good story and arc and closing. What do you call it? A resolution or whatever. So
Yeah,
I
that's a good metaphor for
yeah,
sure.
I
And
think
that
it's like
the third act is where everybody struggles making movies. And now that I think about it, like with songs, that's where you would like put your bridge, I guess.
yeah, the bridge is always like I think for a long time there was a moment where I was kind of struggling with bridges when I was started writing a lot by myself because I think for a long time, if I was writing in the room with Chris from Power Trip or something, we would, I'd kind of maybe have a loose structure of how I wanted the song to go, maybe a verse, chorus, or something like that, and the bridge would always sort of just happen instinctually, which I think is how it should happen, but I didn't even really think about it. I mean, we would just kind of keep playing and it would just naturally happen like the energy in the room. He does a fill into the next part and it just sort of writes itself in a way. Like you can just feel it. But I think when you're writing by yourself, it's a little harder to feel it sometimes. But, that's where, if you get to that point where you're writing by yourself or whatever, and you kind of hit that brick wall or you're on that cliff of the bridge, that's where you got to turn to your favorite records and your favorite songs and start kind of studying what they do because and then I think after a while, your instincts can kind of tell you what type of riff is a bridge riff or what type of thing you can do for a bridge. Or, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it, and that's where it gets really fun when you start picking up on all those different things. Like there's some bridges that are 10 seconds long, and then they just go and repeat the same part they just played.
Yeah.
It's like it hasn't happened in like 5 minutes, but then there's others where it does a whole other thing, But yeah, those are fun to do. They can be hard, but that's where the nerd stuff and the really taking notes on your favorite records and trying to you know follow what they did is fun.
Totally. So talk a little bit about like forming Power Trip. You guys formed in 2008. Were you in bands before Power Trip?
Yeah, we started in I would say yeah like the very beginning of 2008. Yeah, I had a band with Nick and Wetzel from Power Trip called Reality Check, which was just like a hardcore. We played a lot of covers. I mean, we covered like Negative Approach and Floor Punch and Outburst and stuff like that. We were just sort of like a standard hardcore band. I guess you could have kind of compared us to sort of what was happening in the mid 2000s, I guess. I mean, it kind of sounded um, like Boston Mental, like stuff like that. Yeah, kind of like Mental, or I mean, we weren't nearly as good as Mental, obviously, but we were. That was like just kind of moshy, fun, hardcore. And yeah, so we were doing that, and we we were just kind of ready to do something new. And I think obviously, like in Texas at least, we were all getting into and really into crossover and all that. We had Iron Age had just put out their first LP like a year or two before that, I think, and then they were kind of putting out 7 inches, moving towards their second album, so it was getting more and more metal. And Bitter End had put out a crossover record, their first album, so everything, we were just all into that, and that was what was happening, and we wanted to be a part of it too. And I think we had our own ideas about how we wanted to kind of fit in with those bands and like play something maybe a little different. But obviously we were big fans, and those guys were friends of ours. So yeah, I remember just kind of like I knew about Riley. We knew of him because he had sang in a band in Dallas called Balls Out, which was just like a kind of melodic hardcore band, but
I
they were
remember hearing some stories about that band.
yeah, they were pretty popular in Dallas, and they were known around the state. So they were kind of they had been in the scene for, you know, I'd say by that point like handful of years, maybe 3 or 4 years or something. And yeah, like, you know, I remember he was sort of just bouncing around shows, hanging out, and everyone knew who he was, but he didn't have a band at the time because Balls Out had broken up. And I think me and him, like, I forgot how we got connected. I didn't really know him that well, and then we met at a show, and I think we just started talking on like MySpace or something, and just like throwing records at each other. Hey, oh, you like Leeway? Oh yeah, like you like Cro-Mags, and we had just connected. We liked a lot of the same stuff at the time, and we just started talking about that. And then I just kind of started sending him demos of stuff with me and my friend who was our original drummer. His name was Mark, and we would just kind of write stuff at his house in his parents' living room, and I'd send him a demo, and he'd be like, "Yeah, this is awesome!" Like, this. And yeah, not long after that, I think we had written a handful of songs, and he came in and uh, did vocals in my friend's bedroom, and we recorded the demo ourselves, very poorly, but it was a demo in the 2000s. The 2000s were weird. Everyone had like crappy computers, and they were with like really primitive digital recording software. So and we were like, yeah, my friend was 15, who was the drummer, and he recorded the demo. So we were really young, um, and that was kind of how it started. So and then yeah, so basically me and Nick and Wetzel from Power Trip or from Reality Check, we picked him up, and we had my friend Mark on drums for a little while, and then I think like literally we played 2 or 3 shows with him, and his parents wouldn't let him go out of town for a show. He basically like kicked himself out of the band because of his parents. Luckily, my parents were cooler at the time, but yeah. And then we got the drummer of Balls Out, Marcus Johnson, to play drums for like the first, I guess, first year or two. Um, yeah, and that's kind of how it all began.
Wow. So at some point you pick up Chris Ulsh. And I was actually ignorant to the fact that you guys were like slugging it out for a while before that first record came out. I was introduced to you guys. I was living in Arizona at the time, and the drummer for my band at the time was like, "Yo, have you heard this band Power Trip?" And it's right when Manifest Decimation came out. But yeah, you guys were slugging it out. Like, I think not enough people are aware of that it really is like a fucking came up from the bottom DIY style, like as DIY as it gets. But yeah, so at some point you guys pick up Ulsh. What do you remember about making that first full length?
Well, yeah, like we were just a straight up hardcore band in the 2000s. You know what I mean? Like we were, this was before smartphones and stuff, so we were just getting in a van and playing shows on the floor and playing whatever. Um, so we did that for a while, and we kind of I think we put out one EP in like '09, and then I think a single maybe in 2010. And yeah, then we did the album. But that was, I think in what was it? I think it was because I moved to Arizona actually for a year.
Right, you lived in Tucson for a minute, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we had kind of slowed down around that point. And I think it was that summer we started. We did a couple tours. We played out in California, and it was like, oh, we getting a little bit of steam here, and so I think when that happened, I moved to Arizona, and then it was that year I was in Arizona. I think Marcus left the band, and we had played with Mammoth Grinder and toured with like our first tour we did was in the summer of 2009, and it was with Iron Age and Mammoth Grinder, and maybe Hatred Surge too. And we all went out and played Sound and Fury, I think in 2009. And so we had known Ulsh and like played with him and played shows with Mammoth Grinder. And I think he was just like, oh, I play drums too. Like I'll play drums in the band. And I remember coming back and writing some stuff with him at Riley's house that year, like 2010, 2011, when I was visiting from school. So I moved back that year. And anyways, so moving forward from there, yeah, Ulsh had been in the band for about a year maybe or less, and then we recorded that album in 2012, the summer of 2012, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I mean, it was just like me and Chris getting together, in Denton where I lived, when I moved back, and then I'd go down to Austin and we would jam in like a little storage unit. And yeah, I mean, we just got together and we wrote it. I'd say like it seems like it was pretty quick, just like that. And yeah, like I think a lot of the riffs I wrote when I was in school at Arizona. When I lived in Arizona for a year because I was didn't have anything else to do, and uh, some of the stuff I even wrote, I think when I was like in high school, it just sort of stuck around. But yeah, it was fun, like learning a lot more about writing and playing with him, and kind of combining our instincts and all that stuff. And uh, yeah, then we recorded the album with Arthur, who we had met like I'd say a year or two before that, maybe. We played with like Razzle Dazzle, or a band that he was playing in at the time, and he was like the resident metal dude. And this was kind of back in the days where there were less metal hardcore dudes, like when if you saw a dude with super long hair at the hardcore show in like a Battery shirt or whatever, black metal, you're like, who the fuck is that guy? Like, what's he doing here? It was definitely less common, but it was cool at the time because we were all getting into metal, and we were into crossover and all that, and to see a super metal dude at a show, like I want to know that guy. And I think the War Hungry album that he played on and wrote a lot of stuff with had come out recently too, so he was like another one of us. We were like, hell yeah. And so we went up and recorded that with him, yeah, in 2012. And yeah, it's interesting, like I think about it a lot now. Like we didn't really like we would demo the songs in the rehearsal space, like me and him playing them, but we never demoed vocals. Like I had no idea what Riley was gonna do until we were in the studio. It was like we're sitting there about to cut the vocals, and I'm like, man, I hope this is good. Like, and I not that I was necessarily worried, but it was like, I was too young to really, know what was going on in terms of like the finality of what he was about to do. Like these are going to be the way that the vocals are on the album, and he's just showing me how they sound right now. So luckily he was really, really talented. So it was generally fine. I mean, we may have had some, I was usually there to, have input on maybe some placements and all that. Obviously, like, he was, because we would sort of write the songs and arrange them a certain way, and I was a little more like, okay, this is the verse, this is the chorus, let's stick to the scripts, and he was generally down to do that. So I would maybe convey that before we got in the studio, but I didn't know how it was going to go until he literally laid it down, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So
That's fucking nerve wracking, man.
yeah, we would maybe like, he would we would talk about it maybe before he went in a little bit how it was going to go. Okay, this is the verse, this is the chorus, but it wasn't really till we got in there, and then I might have ideas as he's tracking. Hey, say it a little like this, but yeah, I mean, it was like all on the spot basically. Is not that he had probably worked on it by himself, but I we hadn't heard anything, so it's pretty funny to think about now that that's how we used to do it. Because now when I write songs with Fugitive or something, we demo all the vocals, and work on it and fine tune it before we even go to the studio, which is
Right.
a good thing to do. It's not, you know,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
it's- 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 it's-
Um, so,
it's-
I want to know what it felt like. I remember hearing Manifest Decimation for the first time after like band practice or something, but it seemed as an outside, having an outsider perspective, it seems like it popped off like pretty quick. Is that what it felt like to you guys? Like it blew up right away, or was it kind of like more of a slow burn from your perspective?
Well, it's weird. Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped. It definitely helped us, but it was still. I guess comparing it to now, it's so different because it was still like the early days of social media and all that, like of social media as we know it now. So it's like to think of how we, I guess you would say, popped off. I mean, we definitely got more well known. I wouldn't really say we got like it wasn't like the second album. I think we had kind of built up some, a network by then, and people were stoked for us to put out an album, and it was kind of there was some anticipation, and whatnot. And I think maybe also at the time, like what we did sonically was different, I guess, for what people were doing. Not that we didn't invent that or anything, but I think part of the reason the album sounds the way it does is it was kind of I think it was like a rejection of the modern recording style that we had come to know, and like we went really far in the other direction, for better or worse. And it's like I think people just were like, whoa, this band is like doing something that hardcore bands or whatever have not been doing at all, or yeah, something like that. So and yeah, there weren't a ton of bands doing that, like playing crossover or whatever at that time, I guess, outside of Iron Age and Bitter End and whatnot. There didn't feel like there were. So yeah, it definitely helped us, but it was still, I wouldn't really say we were like you know, that popular or anything still. I think it helped a lot. It got some good press and all that, and we were actually on a label which was at the time was like sort of unheard of for hardcore bands. Like I always kind of talk about this with people. It's like I think about the fact that us and like Zabalba and Nails and Black Breath were on Southern Lord, and that was like a huge, like, whoa, those guys are on a label, because
Yeah.
that era, like the late 2000s, that's when all the major labels kind of went down like in flames, and there was this weird kind of wasteland environment of record labels at that time, like from when they went down in like the mid late 2000s until I guess Spotify kind of came around and streaming, and they sort of started popping up again. But at least in the hardcore world, like nobody was getting signed or like getting taken a chance on or anything like that. Well, hardcore was still pretty small too, So it was like I just remember no one was really on a label. Like Terror was on a label, but they were like from the Headbangers Ball, like metal, like Hatebreed world.
Right. They're a generation
Like they
maybe
were getting signed in the
before
late
us.
2000s where like CDs were still selling and stuff, or maybe they were. So it was like the hardcore scene was just like not getting those opportunities. It was like little hardcore labels and stuff. So yeah, I think we felt like, whoa, we're on a label like that put out our album. We're getting like magazines are talking about it a little bit. Like this is crazy. And now it's like, there's so many more labels and bands from the hardcore scene are so much easily, or so they get signed so much more easily. There's just more out there. There's more ways for bands to recoup and all that stuff. So it's just yeah, we were just excited, even back then, like just getting anything we got, we were stoked.
Totally. So I saw you guys for the first time. Oh man, I want to say 2016. Did you guys play South by 2016? I remember I saw you like in a
Yeah,
gravel parking lot, and there were like food trucks around, and Riley said a bunch of wild shit on stage and basically like
yeah,
caused a riot. I remember he said like we're not here to impress like social media people or managers or labels or whatever industry people. We're here because we want to play with our friend and like play in front of our friends and watch them fuck this place up. And then I'll never forget that. It was literally like a fucking riot. Was that 2016? Do you remember that?
you remember where it was? I remember.
Fuck, I don't know, because my band at the time was playing some official showcases, and we had to get like all our credentials or whatever at the convention center.
Yeah.
And I remember like running from the convention center to wherever you guys were playing. It was the middle of the afternoon in a gravel parking lot. People were throwing fucking trash cans through the air. Shit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was probably, I think we played in front of Beerland. Like I think we played I have this vision of us playing outside at Beerland and it
Yeah, it was definitely outside. And there was a
I,
stage.
yeah, I feel like 2016. Like that felt like it was more early like 2012 or something maybe, but I could be wrong. Like 2016 cuz that was like a year I probably wouldn't even have been playing with them because I was like finishing school and all that and
That's so weird. I'm
it
trying
could have
maybe a
we played like every year and we would play tons of shows. You know, we would do like 5 or 6 shows in one weekend at South by or like three in a day. You know, we would do that all the time. So it could have been any of those years, but that does sound like something that happened.
maybe it was earlier. I'm trying to think because there were like several different South by experiences for me. So maybe I saw you guys a couple of times. But anyway, leading up to the second record, Nightmare Logic, which really obviously popped off. Yeah, we were actually with you guys when I was in Gate Creeper. We were touring with y'all around the time that that came out, maybe like shortly before it came out. But I remember we crashed with Riley after the Dallas show. We were on tour with Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah.
This was what 2017, right?
Yeah, that was after the album came out because I think we did that tour right after we toured with Exodus and Obituary, and that was like the first album tour we did. So I think it was like the second tour. Not very long after it came out, but it was
Okay, well, maybe on an earlier Gate Creeper tour, we stayed with Riley. I think
yeah.
that's what it was, and the album wasn't out yet, and we crashed at his place. I remember waking up. I was like in his roommate's room, and there were just like AK-47s all over the fucking place, just like out, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're talking about. Where you
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
So we got up the next morning, and he just kind of casually was like, "Oh, you guys want to hear the new record?" And we listened to the whole thing. And I remember like looking around the room, just being like, "Holy shit!" Like we knew. Did you guys know that it was special when you were working on it? Because we did when we first heard it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we felt good about the way it was going for like, especially just writing it, it sort of felt like the songs were writing themselves in a way. Like, because I mean, me and Ulsh, like, we banged that whole thing out in like 2 weeks, I think. Like I had all these parts and these ideas, like, kind of in my back pocket, but once we got in the room, yeah, it was just like it was really fluid. Like every time we went to the space every day, it was like, we'd have an idea or whatever. I'd write something the night before, I'd have something, and then we would just like finish the idea and it would like all the instincts and songwriting things were sort of kicking in and it was just sort of like happening really easily. Even like the Executioner's Tax, like the most popular song, like I always talk about, like we wrote that in like 10 or 15 minutes, and
Yeah, like Paranoid, Black Sabbath, Paranoid,
people say
same.
like, oh, that's because it's such an easy song. But it was like I was just like I had I think the main riff or something, and we just started jamming and like everything. We just kind of started playing and jamming, and all the stuff he was doing on the drums kind of like dictated where we went with it, and like it just. I remember the bridge. I just like improvised, and I don't know. It just like it came together really easily. So like that 2 weeks where we wrote the album was just like everything was kind of clicking, and it was like all the stuff I had was felt good, and even if it was like, hey, I need like one part for this song, and like Ulsh has a riff or something, and we throw it in there, and it fits in perfectly. I don't know. Everything worked out. It doesn't always work that way where everything kind of comes together that easily. But there's also something to be said about not overthinking it, I guess. And there's an element of that I wish I still had of like not thinking it, thinking it too much. I mean, I think thinking is good, but sometimes you got to just go with instinct, and that's I think where that's where the room really kicks in because in this age now, I mean, it's hard not to write by yourself or write with your computer or whatever because it's so convenient and you can write anytime and you can put stuff together by yourself, which is really good in so many ways. But something about, when you go to the space and like you're in a room that sounds like okay and you're with another guy that you trust, and if it feels good in the room, it's just you just roll with it, and it's like it feels good when you play it. There's just something to be said about that because then once it feels good in the room, to me, like there's no questions about it. It's like, you just, yeah, it feels good. It was the right thing to do. Like we made the right decision. It's good. And
That's a very wise perspective, and I need to I need to take heed of that for sure because I write pretty much completely by myself, like finish entire songs, kind of like what you're
I do
talking
that.
about.
I do that too now. So it's like
Yeah,
it's hard not to do that, but when you do have that room element where it just feels good and sounds good right there, there's just something about that like you won't question. Because when you write by yourself on the computer, like there's so many things that sound really badass on a demo on a computer or something, and then you go in the room and you're like, I don't know, like, is this really badass? Like, is this as good as it sounds here? Or like, and in the room, if it sounds good when you're playing it together, just right there, I feel like, then you can't, at least in your mind, you can just go, yeah, this is the right thing, and you can live with it one way or the other.
totally. Do you have like I try to ask prolific riff writers this question as well. Do you have like a favorite thing, that song or riff or multiple riffs like that you've written that you just really like remember getting such a good feeling when you came up? If you had to pick like one song or maybe one riff, what do you think it would be?
That's a good question. Yeah, like probably probably the Soul Sacrifice, the Power Trip song, that first riff, like the heavy part. That one I was definitely like when I wrote that, I was like, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of parts. I like the last song on the album, Crucifixation, like that one. Just really like the intro and the middle part and the way it kind of kicks in the up into the mid tempo. There's a lot of parts like that. I don't know. Like that's a good one. The chorus of like the last Fugitive song, Blast Furnace, like that just kind of happened, and I was like, that's cool. I don't know where that came from. It was just sort of like I think I was like trying to play like write some. I don't know. It was like I was thinking about Judas Priest at the time or something, like Judas Priest. But I was like, I don't know, just like stuff like that. Yeah, there's a handful of them where I'm like, I still really like that riff, and I don't know where it came from, or I don't even remember like some stuff I literally don't even remember writing or anything. It's just like,
Yeah, the best ones just come from somewhere else. It really does feel that way.
yeah, like that one for sure. Yeah, stuff like that. I think it's just, especially the ones you don't even remember writing.
Yeah.
I guess that's
So
just guy.
let's talk about Fugitive a little bit. Had you been planning on doing another project, or was it more of just kind of a response to everything that happened with the pandemic and everything, like 2020, all the shit we all went through, but you guys got hit particularly hard. Yeah, was it planned for a while or kind of more sporadic?
Yeah, it wasn't really planned in the sense like, I was at this point where I couldn't do anything. We had written like a whole Power Trip record. I mean, I'd worked for like years writing another Power Trip record that never happened. And, me and Olsha tried to, we did record a lot of that stuff just to do it. And we tried to make some stuff happen. We tried with some couple different singers, just trying out some stuff, and nothing really materialized. So I was sort of at that time, I was like playing in a different tuning because I was gonna like potentially play with another band for a second. It just didn't happen, but I just started playing another tuning, and I think in like the early 2010s, I had played around with some death metal stuff with my friend, and I had a couple riffs from that I never used that I thought were cool. And yeah, I was just like, well, I'm just gonna do something else. And I was playing in a step down, and it just opened up some new ideas, stuff because I was playing standard tuning, and it's pretty brutal in terms of like if the riff works or not. But there's riffs that like if you go a step down that might sound a little less cool in standard, they sound better. So, and then yeah, all the stuff that I like that's a little more down tuned and heavier, I wanted to play around with that more. And so I just started writing some stuff, and I was really good friends with, had become really good friends with Seth like the last probably a couple of years before that. We live in the same town, and we had hung out during the pandemic a lot. And he was kind of turning the corner as a singer. Like, he'd been fronting hardcore bands and stuff for as long as Power Trip's been a band, but I didn't really hear him like do anything outside of just the hardcore realm vocally, where I was like, whoa, you can do that, Like, I knew he was a good singer, but he was just, he's playing like just in hardcore bands and stuff, so that's like a certain sound. But when I heard him on like one of the more recent releases of his band Scourge, I was like, oh shit, I didn't know you could do that, And when he showed that he had like a different side to him, or he was able to kind of go into that territory, I was like, oh, this could be cool. So we were just hanging out. I was like, you want to just like sing on some of these songs? And it was totally an experiment. I had no idea if it was going to work. Like, we may have just like tried it. Nope, this isn't good or whatever. And we just, okay, never mind. That was fun, whatever. But we just established like a good chemistry, like working together on whether it was on lyrics or placements or anything. And I like being involved in that. I have a pretty solid vision for how I want things to turn out usually, and like where I want things to be and phrasings and all that. And so it just worked out that we had that chemistry together. He's like really cool and really down to collaborate, down to listen to things I have to say, whatever. And I think it kind of goes back and forth. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how it came together. And then obviously I had no other band or anything, so I just wanted to get back on stage and get back to writing and playing, because I was kind of, at that point where I'd been playing in Power Trip so long and touring, and that was what I did for a living, that I wasn't really ready to let that go yet. Just wanted to keep fighting, and if I had no other options, then maybe I would have just said, okay, well, it's whenever, one day maybe it'll happen again, but for now I got to go do something else. But that kind of saved me and was able to keep me playing and writing and staying creative and doing music. So I'm really thankful for that. And yeah, I'm just really, really glad that it worked out. And it's kind of weird how life works out. It's just like, oh, where can I find a singer? I can't play unless I find a singer. They're so hard to find. It's like, oh, actually one of my best friends that lives down the street is a singer. So it's kind of funny how that works out. It's like,
It's beautiful, man.
how the way it worked out with us being able to do Power Trip stuff again with him, and him doing such a great job. It's like, it's just crazy how life works out sometimes, that like,
Well, I'm glad you guys hung in there, man, because as somebody who has always like really, really rooted for you guys, it's been awesome to see you guys come out the other side of it. And now you have the problem that everybody wishes they had, which now you have not one but two bands that people seem to love that are keeping you busy. So I'm really happy for you, dude, and for all of you guys. Speaking of that, how was the fucking Pantera tour, dude? That looked like a good time.
yeah, it was amazing. I don't really, it's hard to describe. People ask me, oh, how was it? I'm like, I mean, it was just fucking awesome, like, it was a dream. I mean, we got to play an arena every night to like 10,000 people or more. We were playing right before him, so the place was packed. It was amazing. They were really, really cool to us. The crew was amazing. The openers, there were a couple different openers that switched off. Like, one did the first half, one did the second half, but they were really cool. Yeah, it was, Europe is always kind of a mixed bag to go over there, and whether you're going to enjoy it or not. And, getting to play an arena every night, and, you got catering, and you got a big stage, and their fans were super receptive of us and were totally cool. I was, I felt pretty good about our ability to go out there and perform every night. We've played to festival crowds, we've played to different crowds, and we've been doing it a long time. So I knew we would like get them going, but I wasn't sure if they were going to be like, all right, get off stage, let's bring Pantera out. This was their first European tour in like 30 years or something crazy. And they were really cool. They were really receptive. They didn't boo us off stage. They were engaged like the whole time. So it felt really good to get that, validation of like, oh yeah, we can still play to crowds that don't know us, and people, and even Pantera fans, and they dig it. I mean, there's some similarities between us and Pantera. I mean, I've always been inspired by, the songwriting and the groove riffs, Dimebag and Vinny's like their sense for groove and their interesting riffs, like I mean, so unique and there's always like an interesting groove or something to it. And I've always been drawn to that too. So I think there's definitely some parallels there, enough at least to where they weren't like, who the hell is this? This is like something different. And Seth, like he stepped up to the plate, and every time we play, together, we get better, and he's just like getting better and better as a front man, and he really owned it, and he carried us, and like really, I thought did a great job, and for a guy that, we have like decade of experience playing in front of big crowds and all the big gigs and all that, and he had been playing hardcore shows and stuff for a long time, but to kind of get on that level with us really quickly and rise to the occasion is like a pretty amazing feat because even us as a band, playing guitars and drums on stage, like I thought about it all the time. I'm like, I don't think there's not a ton of bands that could go up here every night to a full arena and like give them something with, and do the confidence and every night in and night out, like play to rise to the occasion. So it's tough to do. I think you have to just like get in that headspace and be, ready for that. And for him to be able to do that was really impressive, and it made us really stoked and confident, and it just made us feel good. We had only played like I think 4 or 5 shows maybe total since we got back together before doing that. So it was a huge jump. We'd played some big shows. Like our second show was at No Values in California, and that was probably like maybe 14,000 people or 16,000. I forgot what they said it was, but it was a lot of people, but it was kind of, it was like a sea of people, like a festival. So you can't really see that far back
Yeah.
people, but it's not as daunting as like when you go out on a stadium or an arena and there's like people up here and way out there, and it gets in your head if you think about it too much, especially when we were running in-ear monitors, which we've never done before. You kind of have to
How was that? I really need to get on those for my
yeah,
singing.
for singers, I would absolutely recommend it. I know Seth really likes it to be able to hear his voice, because if you can't really hear your voice that well, then you can't tell if you're going too hard and blowing out your voice. You can't tell what you sound like. So for singers, I think it's really, really good to have if you're able to. For us, like, for me at least, it was a really big adjustment because you get, since I was, I don't know, 13, 14, I've been playing shows, and like there's a sound of an amp, and the space that you have, how the amp, how the notes resonate and go out, it's like that's something I'm just accustomed to and I've learned to play to. That's kind of like how I'm comfortable on stage. And having it in your ear is like, to me, I always tell people it's like being in the studio with headphones on, or like
Mm.
having your AirPods in the studio or something, and like you hear every little note and every little movement you make, and it's not that thing where you're hearing the amp kind of blasting out and you're getting that space. There's this space between you and that makes you comfortable, and that you're like, that's how you play, and when you have that in your ears and you're moving around and doing all that stuff, it's just a totally different thing, and it just takes time to get used to. I think Benante from Pantera and Anthrax, he was telling us, he was like, yeah, it takes 2 weeks to get used to at least. And it took a while. I don't know if I ever really fully got comfortable, but I got a little more used to it. And there's benefits and costs. I mean, like the
Right.
benefit is that you can walk around anywhere and you can hear the drums always. The drums always sound pretty cool. You can walk around anywhere. You can always hear everything pretty much. But to me, the place that really is the cost is the sound of the guitar. It's just like it's a kind of mic'd up sound right in your ear. That's like, to me, a lot thinner. Obviously, it's not like a wall of amps. I mean, I think the perfect combo is when you're in a club and you use them, because you get like all the vibrations in the feel of the amps right behind you, and you get the precision of the stuff in your ears. So like when we would play off day shows at clubs and I would wear them, I liked them a lot more. The arena is a little tougher because you do have side fills and you have some subs and stuff, but you're not really getting the amps really far away. Like you're not getting the feeling. So it can be thin if you don't have it. It can be very thin if you don't have it dialed the right way or whatever. So it was kind of like it was a little bit of a toss up. I'd say like most of the time it was all right, but there were a few nights where I was just like, God, this is especially like lead guitar is like you better like if you're not, they can't hear what you're hearing exactly. They're hearing a mix out there, but like you're hearing every fucking thing. So you miss one little note and then it gets in your head. Oh fuck, like they heard
Yep.
that. It's a mental thing. I sort of had to honestly like I started drinking a little bit before I play. I never do that, but I'd have like one full beer to loosen up. I usually, I mean, it's not that I don't like drinking, but I just before I'd play, usually like I'd like to just be like focused, and on this tour I had to drink like a full beer just to get like just to take the edge off, because if you're
Yeah, get more into it since you're not able to get as into it
you
with the
gotta let
actual.
go, you gotta let go, and like not be tense. Because if you go out there and you're stiff and you're having like, I would never, I even in the past I wouldn't really warm up very much. I would just kind of go out there. But for these shows, like I'd warm up for like 20 minutes. We had some like headphone stuff with the iPhone that you could kind of play, and I'd warm up and play all the leads and everything and just kind of get loose. And then I'd, drink a beer or something. You gotta kind of get loose and not get in your head about how many people are out there, what you can hear in your ears. It's like, because you don't have that space. You have this like direct signal in your ear, and then you think that's what everybody out there is hearing.
Right. Yeah, that's intimidating, I'm sure.
So,
So hey, do you have any updates on a Fugitive full length? Is that happening?
we recorded two songs back in the fall, which have taken forever because we obviously, we played a bunch of shows, and then Power Trip went on tour and all this stuff. But we are about done with those. One is we just did a video for one, and I think we're gonna cut a couple more, like next week, and we have an album written, but we're just trying to decide if we need to, what makes sense right now with everything going on. Obviously, you have Power Trip keeps getting shows and a lot of cool opportunities, and that train kind of keeps rolling. And we want to get to all the places we haven't been yet, and take every cool opportunity we get. Like you don't want to miss out on that stuff. So just given all the activity, I think we might put out like half of that stuff, and because all the music we've written for Fugitive is really cool, and it's like it's a little different from Power Trip, obviously, but in the same wheelhouse. And definitely excited about the new song we have coming out. I think that video and song will come out like in a month or so, and so we want to keep doing stuff with Fugitive and having fun with that, and maybe doing the album down the road. Not really sure what's happening with Power Trip right now. Like we're kind of in the early stages of talking about that, and just it's kind of like, I think it's kind of we have to just keep an open mind and see. I don't think I'm always the type of person, like I don't want to do anything that doesn't sound good or feel good, or that isn't right. So we have a lot of music that in the archives for Power Trip that could, I think we could finish, but we have to try it first and see if it's all good, without committing to that, because we really respect the legacy of what we've done musically. And if it doesn't feel like Power Trip, or if it's not quite the same or whatever, I mean, it's obviously it's never going to be the same, but the integrity of the band musically is very much still there. The songwriting style that I've always done is, I still know how to do that, and I think I know what we did and what makes us sound like Power Trip in a lot of ways. Obviously, no one's ever gonna do what Riley did, in terms of his, like, he had a certain approach to lyricism and how he did things, and we always want to honor that, and we love those songs, and we're always going to play those songs. But we just, if we do something that feels like it measures up, and it feels like it continues the sound and the story in the right way, then maybe we'll go that way. But right now I got this Fugitive stuff, and I'm really proud of that, and I want to just make the good music where it should be made, without I don't know, I want it to be good, whatever it is. So we'll kind of approach that when the time comes. We have a lot of shows coming up and cool things ahead. So I want to make everybody happy. I want everybody that I play with to be able to play and have fun, and I want to be able to play all the cool shows. So I don't know where that's going to lead, but right now we just got some Fugitive stuff that's coming out. I think it'll be really cool for everybody to hear. Yeah, that's all I got right now. But
Awesome, man. I'm gonna ask you one more just kind of fun question. I'll let you go. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of guitarists, but specifically like riffers, not necessarily like lead guitar, but like your Mount Rushmore of riffers?
yeah, I like this question. I'm glad that you narrowed it down to riffers because
Nice.
I'm not really the guy to talk to about the lead guitar virtuoso guys. I mean, there's so many great lead guitar players, and I love a lot of them. That's not my like forte in terms of what I am super into. You know me, I'm more of a riff guy. So Mount Rushmore. I mean, for metal, let's narrow it down to metal, maybe, right?
Metal riffers, yeah.
Metal riffers, yeah. And this is my personal preference, not making a statement about facts here, but um, I mean, my favorite right hand is Malcolm from AC/DC. What can you say? I mean, he's got to be like the greatest rhythm guitar player. I guess I don't know if you'd call that metal, but in the hard rock metal spectrum, big fan of Malcolm. I would say Hetfield's definitely on Mount Rushmore. Can't say that he's not. Iommi, I mean, come on, can't say anything less than that about him. He's in the middle. Who else? That's good. How many is that? Is that three?
That's three. I don't even know how many faces are on Mount Rushmore. I think it's
Yeah, I don't
five,
either.
four or five.
At 4 or 5. I gotta look at my wall of the goats here. Um, Let me think. God, there's just so many good ones. It's like impossible. Those three for sure. Let me think if I can give you another one that I would definitively put on there. I mean, in terms of influence, like I mean, I really like Tom G from Celtic Frost. I just think that they're so influential and so you know, I guess widely appreciated. That's not like a name that everybody in metal would put on the list necessarily, maybe because he's came a little bit later. But like, I mean, I guess you'd argue. I mean, they started pretty early on, but they're more underground, and I just like really appreciate the angle that he came from. Kind of like bring kind of punky, getting super heavy, very influential on everybody from Sepultura to Obituary to, I mean, you name it. So I
Yeah, that's a great answer because
put
he
him on.
he almost he kind of single-handedly like informed the more extreme subgenres of music.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's tough because there's so many good guys. I don't want to like miss anybody, but I mean, Hanneman, Kerry King, like those two together, whatever day of the week, like they're, they're huge. But there's so many good guys. I mean, dude, Gary Holt, like, you know, Tipton Downing from Judas Priest. Like, I mean, pick your poison. There's so many amazing guitar players that it's like it's impossible to pick a top 3 or 5. But
Well, that's
I,
that's a great little list you put
I'd
together
say,
there.
yeah,
That
if I had to pick three of just like everything that I like, it's like Malcolm, Hetfield, Iommi, and that kind of covers the like rhythm guitar, heavy guitar riff spectrum pretty well. But then there's like the list goes crazy after that. So
yeah, totally.
I'd say those three for me personally. I'm probably forgetting someone really obvious that everyone will rag on me for forgetting, but there's just like there's so many good ones, man. I don't know, but those are the three guys. I'm like, man, there's nothing better than that, for
Hell
sure.
yeah. Well, cool, man. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you'd like to tell the people?
Um, I don't know. Thank you for wanting to listen to me talk about anything, and just very happy to be able to play music and still do what I do. There was like a time in my life where I couldn't do that at all, and I'm just very thankful to be able to do what I get to do, and very lucky to be surrounded by cool people and musicians and people like you that want to have me on their podcast. So yeah, I'm just grateful, and I appreciate everybody who supported Fugitive or Power Trip or anything I've ever done. You know, I can't do anything without people being interested in wanting to see us or listen to the music. So thank you to everybody for just any level of support, and people like you for being cool, and people that live in our state that carry the torch and like try to be purveyors of all this stuff. You do a great job on your podcast, and
Oh, thanks, man.
you're
Well,
not too
I
shabby.
really
Yeah.
say what?
So you're not too shabby yourself either, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man, and it's been rad seeing you guys getting back at it, and we're all very proud of you and rooting for you and psyched, man. So everybody go check out follow Blake and Power Trip and Fugitive on the social media platforms of your choice. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up. And man, Blake, thank you. And hope to see you soon, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Hope to catch you too. I'll be in Austin next week, so I might hit you up.
Yeah, yeah, I'm around, man.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Peace out.
Later.
Riff.